Welcome. So good to be with you on this Wednesday as we get together for a little midweek Bible study and devotional time. So glad you're taking some time out of your day, out of your week to join us to dive into God's word and hopefully be uplifted and encouraged and maybe even a little bit challenged by what he has to say to us. Have you ever gotten so used to something being, broken or not working properly that you just kinda learn to live with it, right? There's probably a lot of things around your house or, apartment or whatever it may be. Maybe it's a squeaky door that, you've been, meaning to fix, but you just haven't gotten around to it. Maybe it's the phone that you've got with a cracked screen, that you've just learned to deal with, or maybe the kitchen drawer that kinda just always sticks and you gotta pull it just right to get it out, or maybe the leaky faucet or the leaky toilet or whatever it may be that you've just kind of tuned out the background noise. It's just always running, but you've just kind of learned to live with it, right? The list goes on and on. We just get used to things sometimes not working like they should, and after a while it almost just feels normal. That's kind of the situation that we find in our story in John chapter 5. Jesus goes to Jerusalem, and he goes specifically to this pool, this basically healing pool, as they called it, that was called Bethesda in Aramaic. It literally means house of mercy, which is kind of ironic when you think about what's going on there, because it was a gathering place in Jerusalem that was fed, as I said, kind of this healing pool, fed by an underground spring where sick and disabled people waited, believing that its stirred waters would bring healing power. And so there's this crowd gathered around this pool, and yet Jesus singles out one man who, by the way, had suffered from paralysis for, get this, 38 years. Now, not his entire life, but for 38 years he had suffered from this. 38 years of disappointment, 38 years of watching other people get into the pool ahead of him, because the thought was that the first person who got into the pool when the waters were stirred, they would be healed. And so he's watched for 38 years someone get ahead of him in trying to get in the pool. For 38 years, waiting on the edge of hope. And Jesus, this is the scene Jesus walks into, and Jesus saw him. He, out of all the people, Jesus saw him, and not just glanced his way, but he noticed him. He acknowledged his humanity. He even took the time to listen to this man's story, even though Jesus knows everything, right? He's God. He knows this man's story before he ever said a word to him, and yet he takes the time to listen. And by the way, maybe that's something that some of us need to be reminded of today, that Jesus still sees and listens to those who everyone else seems to step over and look past and ignore. But before he heals the man, Jesus asks him an interesting question. He asks him, "Do you want to get well? Do you want to get well?" Now, that's a strange question to ask a sick man, right? It's like asking a hungry person if they want something to eat, or a thirsty person if they want something to drink. But Jesus, just to clarify, isn't mocking this guy. He's inviting him, challenging him even. Because sometimes if we're honest, like this man, our pain becomes part of our identity. We cling to it because, to be honest, even though it's exciting, maybe what would happen if things change, it's also kind of scary to think about if they do, right? And Jesus cuts to the heart of the question with this guy. He says, "Do you really want to be healed?" Right? It's more than just, do you want your legs to work properly? He's asking, have you learned to be stuck? Have you learned to live stuck by this pool? Do you really want to be healed, or have you become so stuck in the way it's always been that that's just the way it's always going to be? He's not just talking about physical healing. He's asking if this man, and by proxy us as well, if he's ready to surrender his excuses, his comfort, his cycles of blame, and take the next step toward wholeness. And speaking of taking steps toward wholeness, that's what Jesus calls the man too. He says to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." Notice Jesus doesn't help him into the water, which is what the man wanted. He doesn't even touch him. He simply, gives the command. He bypasses this superstition that the people had about the waters being healing waters in the first place. Jesus just gives the command, and his word brings restoration and healing. And immediately, it says, this man's muscles and nerves and joints, everything that had atrophied, think about it, for 38 years. For 38 years, you don't just get up and walk again, right? And yet he does. He doesn't wobble. He walks instantly despite not being able to do so for 38 years. And then, interestingly, we won't get into all the details, but Jesus disappears right after this into the crowd. The man doesn't even know who has healed him at this point. He doesn't know quite yet who Jesus is, right? It's only later that Jesus finds him again in the temple, of all places, that the deeper purpose of the miracle becomes a little bit more clear. Because Jesus isn't just content with fixing his legs, he's after the man's heart. He says to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something else worse may happen to you." In other words, physical healing was only part of what Jesus came to do. The greater miracle is the wholeness that he came to bring, being right in mind, body, and spirit, and ultimately being made right with God. Jesus wanted this man not just to walk, but to walk in a new way, in a new frame of mind, a new way of thinking, and in a new life, right? And that's what he wants for us too, not just for us to rise from what's been holding us down, but to live in the freedom and the holiness and the life that only comes from him. I guess the only question left to ask is, do we want to get well? Hope you have a blessed day. God bless.